Jujur nak cakap, mungkin benda ni ada agree ada tak agree, tapi sebagai seorang yang China, so macam tu lah, dari situ you guys learn.
Ni dekat Malaysia, tapi aku seorang yang kena keluar Malaysia dan balik. Kenapa? Tak ada sebab lah untuk aku duduk dekat sini.
Tak nak buat interview ni dalam bahasa Melayu, balik pun boleh lah. After they contribute a lot to their family. Education is so important. So a lot.
Halo, hai semuanya. Apa kabar kalian hari ini? Jumpa lagi bersama Sari. Sari doakan kalian tetap dalam keadaan sehat, selalu semangat menjalani hari pastinya, selalu berpikiran positif. Nah, Sari ya betul-betul kagum, respect kepada foreigner ya, daripada luar negara, mana-mana negara. Cepat sangat mempelajari bahasa Melayu ya. Apalagi itu mereka ada juga fasih dialek logat daripada negeri tertentu. Ini menurut Sari ya, salah satu sebabnya adalah punya kawan orang-orang Malaysia, selalu berinteraksi, berborak-borak. Nah, mungkin itu adalah salah satunya. Sari ya, mungkin kalian dengar kurang lah ya bahasa Melayu Sari, walaupun Sari juga cuba juga. Disebabkan Sari itu kurang bergaul dengan orang-orang ya, suka menyendiri, saya dalam dunia saya sendiri. Jadi Sari sikit saja teman di Malaysia ini ya, that's why mungkin itu yang memperlambat proses belajar saya. Kali ini adalah kedua gadis cantik. Nah, mereka boleh sangat fasih dan juga punya dialek daripada negeri tertentu juga, mereka boleh tahu. Cium.
Family dekat Malaysia, tapi aku seorang yang kena keluar Malaysia dan balik. Kenapa? Dia macam ni. Aku kan bukan orang Malaysia. Aku pakai pasport. Jadi untuk aku duduk dekat sini, aku kena ada visa ataupun pas. Macam sekarang ni, aku tengah guna visa pelajar sebab aku pelajar universiti. So bila dah habis belajar, habis jugalah visa tu. Sebab kira macam dah tak ada sebab lah untuk aku duduk dekat sini. Tak ada sebab, tak ada visa, tak boleh duduk sini lah, kena balik lah. Macam family aku pula, mereka boleh je duduk sini. Sebabnya mak aku boleh duduk sini sebab dia kahwin orang Malaysia and dia ada visa macam perkahwinan lah. Adik-adik aku pula semua lahir dekat sini, so mereka adalah warga Malaysia. Aku seorang je lahir dekat sana, warga sana. So sebab tu lah, nanti dah habis belajar memang aku kena keluar lah, kena balik. Melainkan aku sambung lagi belajar ataupun kerja ataupun kahwin.
Warga negara Tajikistan ya teman-teman. Wow, tadi ceritanya aku kena keluar Malaysia ya. Kalau mau stay lama, long term, itu adalah harus ada sebab-sebab tertentu ya, berkahwin dengan orang Malaysia, kerja, belajar, fasih dia berbahasa Melayu ya. Kalau kita dengarkan daripada suaranya, call macam itu, kita fikir dia bukan orang asing ya kan, kita fikir dia itu adalah orang Malaysia. Sampai logat dia di Penang pun dia tahu logat utara. Wow, hebat sekali. Tapi yang menurut Sari tengok, dia ini sudah lama ya tinggal di Malaysia ini. Start dia katanya dibawa ibunya itu waktu kecil lagi. Ada video selanjutnya, ini daripada China.
Jujur nak cakap, mungkin benda ni ada agree ada tak agree, tapi sebagai seorang yang China, tak ada IC, tak ada PR, tak ada Secom, anything, sampai sekarang still pakai visa walaupun dah 30 tahun. I speak Malay like a Malay. Sampai kan orang Melayu ingatkan I Malay, even though I'm Chinese. I boleh speak Chinese, a few slang, Mandarin baku, Mandarin Chinese in Malaysian, or even Cantonese sikit lah, walaupun tak fasih sangat. And I perasan how you nak embrace the language is you're willing to learn, first one. The second one would be whether you're desperate or not. Sebab for me, untuk survival, I have to learn bahasa Melayu sebab I was living in kawasan orang Melayu. So kalau nak berkawan dengan orang Melayu, kita kena cakap bahasa Melayu. That's like my survival skill. Dekat rumah kita orang 100% cakap bahasa Cina sebab both my parents memang cakap bahasa Cina sahaja. Tapi dia orang cakap bahasa Melayu adalah dekat tempat kerja macam tu. Kalau kat luar nak beli sayur ke apa ke, cakap bahasa Melayu. And nombor 3, I perasan senang nak belajar certain language, especially if you're living in Malaysia, surrounded by Malays. I rasa lagi senang. So you just like engage with few Malay friends, and bila diorang nak cakap bahasa English, you cakap No, speak Malay with me. So macam tu lah, dari situ you guys learn. By the time it progress, you don't have to be like fasih 100% macam orang Melayu, tak adalah. Because in the end, different races mestilah different accents ke, different dialects ke. And it's a plus point untuk orang Melayu yang pada cakap bahasa Cina, orang macam impress. Untuk orang Cina yang cakap bahasa Melayu, orang tak impress. Why? Diorang akan rasa macam tu bahasa negara kau. Tapi I rasa macam should be impressed jugalah, since it's still a different language. And I lagi impress kalau orang Cina atau orang Melayu boleh cakap bahasa Tamil. I lagi macam, okay, I suka orang Tamil yang pandai cakap bahasa Mandarin, pandai cakap bahasa Melayu, dia reti 4 bahasa and dia boleh cakap fluently. Dia boleh like blend in. Anyway, to anyone yang tengah belajar new language, whatever language that is, all the best. Progress is progress. And remember, buat kata pepatah, 世上无难事，只怕有心人. Okay?
Good job. Part dia gunakan bahasa Melayu, memang dia macam orang Melayu bila bercakap ya. Slangnya pun slang Melayu betul. Walaupun dia adalah orang China daripada negara China ya, bukan Chinese Malaysian. Nah memang kalau untuk mempelajari banyak bahasa, Malaysia ini memang Sari lihat bagus juga tempatnya. Disebabkan apa? Sari lihat pemikiran orang-orang Malaysia di sini tuh terbuka. Mereka tak bertumpu pada satu bahasa saja, mau mempelajari bahasa daripada negara lain. Tadi katanya sebab-sebab macam mana kita boleh pandai berbahasa Melayu dengan slangnya sekali. Kita harus bercampur memang dengan orang-orang Malaysia, boleh supaya kita faham sikit-sikit apa yang mereka katakan. So, ya kan, seperti kata pepatah mengatakan lama-lama menjadi bukit. Sikit-sikit masuk gitu. Nah, ini adalah video selanjutnya. Dia adalah orang Australia. Katanya 30 tahun dia di Malaysia ini, dia boleh bercakap dengan fasih. Wow, kira.
Kalau you nak buat interview ni dalam bahasa Melayu, boleh lah.
Meet Nordin, an Australian who speaks Malay fluently and has lived in Malaysia for 30 years. In our chat, he shared how he learned to speak Malay so well, the wildlife you can encounter in Kuala Lumpur, and the role of women in Malaysian society. I'm Max, an entrepreneur and YouTuber from Singapore. Let's get started.
My
From
audience just loved you, and you know what was the most popular comments below the video? It's like, dude, he lost his Aussie accent completely and he speaks like Malay. People say, oh, if I close my eyes and I hear this man speaking, I would assume it's Malay.
If my mom calls me and I answer the phone, people are like, oh, are you talking to your mom? I was like, how do you know? Because I automatically switch into an Australian, or more of Australian accent. Having said that, a couple of times I've been to Australia, they ask, oh, where are you from? I'm like, I was born down the road. I think accents are like languages. You should use an accent if you can use it to communicate effectively. And I think one of the things that I've been in Malaysia for 30 years, so it's very easy to adopt that language. But I think one of the hardest languages, again I use the word languages, is Australian. One is the accent, and two is, it's just the words that we use and the combinations that we use them in Australia. It's technically English, but it's very much Australian communication. So I think it's different. Accents can come and go, but I think in terms of accents, I think it's Malaysian English is actually one of the easiest accents to understand.
But you speak like perfect Malay bahasa, yeah? Just
Pretty decent. Kalau you nak buat interview ni dalam bahasa Melayu, boleh lah. So I've been here for quite a while. I've traveled all over the country, stayed in many different parts. I love staying in some of the kampongs as well. So if you don't speak Malay, you kind of miss out on some of the beauty of the place that is Malaysia. When you speak Malay, people smile, people are happy. It just shows that you care enough to learn something. I think it's nice.
Wow, tadi katanya kalau orang call itu tutup mata, kalau dia bila bercakap itu boleh fikir dia adalah macam orang Malaysia ya. Padahal kalau dibuka mata, wow, bukan ya gitu.
can you recall any crazy story or like interesting story that happened with you in Malaysia and Kuala Lumpur during your like 30 years?
Maybe one from the very beginning. There's these small lizards called cicak. They're only like these little white lizards. When we first arrived in Malaysia, we were staying in just off Jalan Ampang. Now, if you stay on Jalan Ampang, there's only like twin towers and buildings above 50 stories or something. At that time, there was a few bungalows there, and it was surrounded by trees and gardens and monkeys and lizards. Back to these small
Cicak.
lizards, they had this cicak. So they're on the walls, and they'll eat the moths and all these kind of things. That time, we were like, oh, there's lizards in the house, you know. And then it was like kind of a first thing you have to kind of get used to. And I was like, okay. Actually, now there's not so many. There's another lizard in Malaysia, the monitor lizards. And these
biawak,
are
ya.
these big, huge. In Australia, we call them goannas, and they're these 6-foot-long lizards. So one day I came home and my brothers were screaming, "Mom, there's some lizards in the house." I was don't worry, they're just
Sudah
they're all over
biasa
the
gitu
place.
ya.
They're normal.
It's normal.
But there were these 2 huge monitor lizards in our lounge room, and they were like trying to like escape because my brothers were like screaming their heads off, and I was like, wow, this is cool. But there was these 2 big monitor lizards. I remember them trying to climb out the window, get out through the curtains. So sometimes you got to check which is the right size lizard that you're dealing with. But you'll even in the capital city in Malaysia, you'll in Kuala Lumpur, there's still big monitor lizards around the place.
What are
Nanti saya juga
your
mau
top
cerita
list
ini.
of places to live in Malaysia but Kuala Lumpur?
One would be Penang. One, the food. Of course, the sea, the ocean, you're close to the ocean. I think also there's quite a bit of industry going on up there. There's an international airport, so you can fly in and out quite easily. The other thing is the kind of like cultural scene in Penang is pretty interesting. That whole UNESCO listing and all those old buildings and architecture. The other probably would be in Johor. And this is really for business. I mean, if I was retiring, I would, and not in KL, I would say Langkawi or Sarawak. But for business, I would say Johor, just because you can just pop over the border to Singapore, and there's also a lot of investment coming into Johor and businesses happening there. So those are kind of like, in a sense, two ends of the country, or in the middle, you choose.
It's funny how you start explaining about Penang, starting with the food. It's like
I can't help it. Sorry.
It's like it's so Malaysian. Why do you think like Malaysians are so obsessed with food?
It's kind of like a national pastime, and I think there's such pride in what is Malaysian food. Of course, there's a lot of like it's Malaysian, not Singaporean or not Indonesian discussions which happen, which is always good. I think there's also that kind of regional competition who has the best food. But I think also within Malaysia, there's such diversity that people aren't aware of. In terms of, even for, let's say, for example, Malay cuisine, it's very different from Kelantan as it is from Kedah, and they're like right next door to each other. And then you multiply that by, the Chinese or the Indians, or now there's so many, and we're in Bangsa, you can see that there's so much good Western food available as well.
Price
and then
also.
You've just got a culture of community, and the community and the culture is built on food. So that's how I think the harmony is achieved. Let's eat more food kind of thing. We'll sort it out over a cup of coffee, over a meal, that kind of approach.
And the main question is Damakan.
Betul.
That you start.
Yes, that's true.
And it's the same in other languages. It's a deep cultural linkage to food.
I went to Langkawi recently. I met the guy. He's Russian, but he married to Malay woman. They have 2 children, and he said like, okay, in Malaysia, the family comes first. The relationships between the family comes first. But the interesting thing that he mentioned, wife and the mother in a family, let's say, keep better connection with the husband, not with the kids. Because with the kids, she loves kids, of course, but kids will grow up and go. An important part, like this connection with the husband. You know what I mean?
I don't know what you mean. I never argue with my wife. I just want to put it on record. I may have asked her certain questions and had certain discussions with her that may have looked like an argument or may have constituted in her mind an argument. But in my mind, I was just asking a simple question. All jokes aside, I think the role of mothers in Malaysia, whatever the race, Malay, Chinese, Indian, Sabah, Sarawakian, they're so important. And I think from the religious background, from the cultural background, I think they play a very important role. And in some other smaller cultures, the women hold all the assets, for example, in some of the different states like Negeri Sembilan. And I'm sure there's probably others. Women in Malaysian culture play a very important role. They have a very strong voice in the family. They contribute a lot to the family. Even whether they are working or not, doesn't matter. They contribute a lot to the family. Education is so important. So a lot of mothers will sit there and do homework with their kids. You're not going out to play, or you're not doing this until you get your homework done kind of thing. So all of that it creates a different understanding of the level of empowerment that women have in Malaysia. Of course, there's many top women business leaders and ministers and all this stuff, but I mean, that's, you can easily see on the statistical side and you can look at that, but I think when you look at the family level, mothers, grandmothers, aunties and big sisters, you know, you don't mess with this side of the discussion, you know. I think that is, it's because of the amount of stuff they do for the family and the level of respect they deserve.
What about the working mother thing? I talk to my friends in Europe and some they say they had a child and after that you have two options. Let's say if you don't have the family with your grandparents, either you hire, you find nanny and it costs like 4 or 5k, like let's say in Switzerland it would be like 4 or 5k francs, Swiss francs, or you just stop working. How does this thing works in Malaysia?
I think there's a mixture of both. I mean, once upon a time, there was a lot of that group of professional women who would go out and work and then they would have a maid take care of the kids and this kind of stuff and then they come home after work. I think it's become a very much a blended reality at the moment. Yes, there's certain people who do that, but I think there's increased role of the extended family. So in some cases, it's the grandparents will take care of the kids while the parents are at work. And then when the parents get home, you know, parents get home, everyone eats together. You know, maybe the mom will check the homework or the dad will check. I don't know. I mean, for me, my job is checking English homework, sometimes maths and sometimes science. And I tell you, kids these days are learning so much. I got to like go and check out a YouTube video before I get home and say, oops, yeah, I'll check that when I get home. And, you know, on the way home, I'm studying, you know, my old geometry homework or something. You know, so I think there's the extended family still plays a very important role in Malaysia, and I think that allows, again, for that level of respect for parents, grandparents, that whole idea of, I think this phrase became, you know, it takes a village to raise a child. You know, this became famous in the West the last few years. It's just been here all along.
I interviewed a lot of foreigners living in Malaysia and I found out, I don't know if it's true or not, that to get a PR here is even more difficult than in Singapore. I know a lot of people from Singapore like complaining about, oh, like I've been here for 10 years and for some reason I don't get a PR. But it seems like, I don't know if it's true or not, it's even more difficult to get a PR, permanent residency here.
I think in terms of visas at the moment, Malaysia has gone through a whole series of ideas. And they've come to quite a decent idea of what foreigners can do. I think PR is of course a very high bar to get the PR sorted out. One, it takes time, and two, it's just the way Malaysia chose to do their visa regime. But having said that, there's a whole bunch of visas that are now available for people who want to do their second home program. That's one, but the other one is really this talent program. You know, there's a huge amount of people now on these kind of this high value talent that's now available as a visa. So if you're an expert in something, this may be the way to come to Malaysia and contribute to the economy here, is through that talent program, where I think you can come for like up to 10 years. I mean, 10 years in the modern context is forever. I'm sure if you got through the 10 years, they're not going to kick you out. After that, they'll probably say, okay, now why don't you do the PR program because we want to keep you. I think that's kind of a nice way to look at it. The only advice I would say is like find out what you're getting into. If your objective is to get Malaysian citizenship or Malaysian PR, be aware of what the journey is. If your objective is to get Singapore citizenship or PR, be aware of what the journey is and plan for it. I think some people rock up and think, okay, we can just it'll sort itself out. But you know, it's also about respecting the country that you're going to go and visit. As I understand the visa regime.
Partnya, Sari juga mau bahas ya. Nah, tadi katanya sangat susah untuk mendapatkan PR or Malaysian citizen di Malaysia between Singapore ya. Sari lihat tengah viral juga. Ya, ini bicarakan Indonesia, ramai orang-orang Indonesia pindah warga negara ke Singapura. Macam orang-orang yang kuliah di sana, itu katanya dengan mudah mendapatkan PR ataupun warga negara Singapura. Tapi orang-orang yang pintar lah ya, orang-orang yang tertentu saja mereka boleh ambil. Yang sudah kawin di sini, anak dia pun sudah besar, ada yang 20 tahun, still juga tidak dapat. Itu bayangkanlah. Sari lihat ya, kalau di Singapura, husband Sari punya saudara, dia bekerja saja di Singapura, boleh dia mendapatkan PR. dia agak bos besar lah ya gitu teman-teman.
Can you give an advice for a foreigner who is just arrived to Malaysia or thinking to move to Malaysia, how to get into the culture, into the society, like faster and easier and like more smooth, as you did, like with all your experience?
First of all, check into the hotel and make sure you're happy, but then just go exploring. And I think whether you are exploring in KL or going exploring in a more regional setting, Malaysia is a very safe place. You know, it's a very safe place, so you're not worried about getting mugged on the street or something like this. If you want to go out and explore yourself, you're pretty much okay. Of course, there's always in some areas you might want to avoid, but honestly, if you just arrived and you're staying at a hotel, you're safe. The other thing is find some Malaysian friends. I mean, there's so many Malaysian diaspora around the world. You probably find out there's a Malaysian living next door to you somewhere, wherever you're thinking of traveling from. Whether they're students or business people have also traveled the world. Malaysians also a very well-traveled group of people. So I think find those Malaysian friends and then use that as doorway into the culture. I think find someone who's happy to. You know, many Malaysians will take you out for lunch or dinner and happily show you their favorite restaurant as a matter of pride. You know, so I think that's. Yeah, don't be afraid to put on a few pounds, is what I would say.
What are the favorite destinations that you think for Malaysians, like to go to work or to go to study?
London, you can ask many Malaysian businessmen, you know, where's the best food in London, and they'll explain to you in great detail. And you know, I've been on trips in London, and the guys, oh come, we're going to go down to this spot for this type of like specialty cuisine. For me, London, Bayswater and kebabs, you know, very simple, but they know where to go. And for me, the other, and of course being Australian, I think there's 3 places in Australia that get a lot of traffic from Malaysians, which is Sydney, Melbourne and Perth. In fact, we have a joke in my family.
Sydney,
you know, people
Melbourne,
ask
Perth.
me, have I been to Perth? And I said, no, I'm not Malaysian. So that's kind of our family joke. I've never been to Perth.
No, for real.
I've never been to Perth. You know, like I said, I'm not Malaysian. Maybe one day I'll go there. I'll find some Malaysians to show me around Perth.
Itu tadi interview mereka. Nah, di sini juga Sari punya pengalaman yang sama juga tadi tentang apa ya tadi tuh biawak. Biawak tadi belakang rumah Sari ini, dia kan ada longkang kecil kan. Sari benar-benar datang ke Malaysia ini tengah cuci pinggan kain musi, tiba Sari lihat macam dia kan dia punya lidah gitu kan, dia macam ini. Saya pikir, tapi dia berhenti. Kalau dia itu macam sama dengan simin, dia mencarilah ketakutan. Ternyata katanya itu dah biasa lalu dekat sana. Ke tadi about food ya, Malaysian food. Nah, menurut Sari tadi tuh dikatakannya betul ya. Kalau di Malaysia contohnya memang banyak jenis makanannya. Bahkan ya contohnya laksa ya. Laksa boleh tiap negeri itu berbeza rasanya. Wow, ini Sari pun dulu laksa pun bukan satu laksa saja jenisnya, macam laksa Penang, laksa Johor, lagi lain kan, yang macam spaghetti itu laksa Sarawak. Nah, itu yang spesialnya daripada Malaysia. Oke teman-teman, so segitu aja video kali ini. Bagaimana pendapat kalian tentang interview mereka yang tadi? Sampai jumpa di next videonya. Bye.